2 in the morning. At this hour, the city didn't just sleep. It held its breath, waiting for the thunder to break. And 70 floors up, in the glass and steel fortress of Sterling Industries, the storm felt personal. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows like handfuls of diamonds being thrown by an angry god. But inside, the air was dead silent. Alara Vance adjusted the strap of her heavy vacuum cleaner, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead with the back of a hand that was red and raw from bleach. She was invisible here, a ghost in a gray uniform. To the billionaires who sat in these leather chairs during the day, she was nothing more than part of the furniture, a mechanism that reset their world while they slept, erasing their coffee stains and their secrets. But tonight, the exhaustion was a physical weight, pulling at her bones. She wasn't just tired, she was hollowed out. Alara paused near the massive mahogany conference table, her eyes darting toward the supply closet at the far end of the room. She held her breath, listening. Cough, cough. The sound was tiny, muffled by layers of winter coats she'd piled on the floor. But to her superior hearing, it sounded like a cannon blast. She abandoned the vacuum and rushed to the closet, cracking the door just an inch. Inside, curled into a ball on a makeshift nest of towels, was Leo. Her world, her heart, her 5-year-old son. He was sleeping fitfully, his small face flushed, clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit that had lost an ear 2 apartments ago. Alara's chest tightened. She shouldn't have brought him. It was against every rule in the employee handbook. Immediate termination, the contract said. But the babysitter wanted $40 up front, and Alara currently had exactly $12 and a maxed-out transit card to her name. It was either leave him alone in a basement apartment with a broken lock, or smuggle him into the safest building in the city. She chose safety. She always chose safety. Leo shifted in his sleep, his stomach giving a low, audible grumble. Hunger. It was a sound Alara knew too well. She pressed a hand to her own stomach, ignoring the cramp of emptiness there. She could handle the hunger. She was used to it. But Leo? She closed the closet door softly and turned back to the boardroom. That's when she saw it. In the center of the table, amidst a scatter of abandoned financial reports, sat a silver tray. The remains of a late-night executive meeting. Most of it was garbage, half-drunk coffees, crumpled napkins. But there, on the edge of the platter, was a plate of artisan sandwiches, roast beef on brioche, smoked turkey with cranberry, leftovers. Trash to men like Declan Sterling. They would be swept into a bin by morning. Alara took a step forward, her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Don't do it, her mind whispered. You're a wolf living in hiding. You don't draw attention. You don't take what isn't yours. But her wolf, the instinctual, primal part of her that she kept buried under layers of cheap soap and fear, whimpered. The cub needs to eat. She looked at the closet. She looked at the sandwich. With a trembling hand, Alara reached out. She snatched a half-eaten roast beef sandwich, the bread still soft, the meat smelling of rosemary and peppercorn. She brought it to her nose, her eyes fluttering shut for just a second as the scent of real food overwhelmed her senses. Ding! The sound of the private executive elevator cut through the silence like a sniper shot. Alara froze. The sandwich was halfway to her mouth. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. No one came up here at 2 a.m. No one. The heavy steel doors slid open with a smooth hiss, and out stepped the devil himself, Declan Sterling. He was exactly as the magazines described him. Only bigger. Terrifyingly bigger. He wore a suit that cost more than Alara would make in 10 years, the charcoal fabric straining across shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the city. He had been looking down at his phone, his expression a mask of bored, lethal indifference. But the moment he stepped into the room, he stopped. Declan didn't just pause. He went rigid. His head snapped up, his nostrils flaring. For 10 years, Declan Sterling had felt nothing. Since the war that took his family, his chest had been a graveyard. His wolf was dormant, a silent beast that refused to hunt, refused to run, refused to feel. He was the ice king of the Onyx pack, cold, efficient, dead inside. Declan's gaze locked onto the woman standing by the table. She was small, painfully thin, dressed in a uniform 2 sizes too big, drowning in gray fabric. Her hair was tucked into a messy cap, strands of chestnut escaping to frame a face pale with terror. She was holding a half-eaten sandwich like it was a stolen crown jewel. He should have been furious. A thief in his boardroom, a stranger in his sanctuary. But all he wanted to do was fall to his knees and worship her. He moved. Alara gasped, dropping the sandwich. She tried to scramble back, but he was too fast. He moved with the blurring speed of an alpha, crossing the room in a heartbeat. He didn't touch her, not yet, but he loomed over her, trapping her between his massive body and the cold mahogany table. The air in the room changed. It became heavy, charged with static electricity, smelling of ozone and rain and him, expensive whiskey and raw power. Alara couldn't breathe. She kept her head down, eyes fixed on his polished shoes, trembling violently. If he recognized what she was, if he smelled the wolf beneath the cleaner, she was dead. Rogue wolves didn't survive in Declan Sterling's territory. "Look at me," he commanded. His voice was like gravel grinding over velvet. Dark, dangerous. Alara shook her head, terrified. "I said." Declan stepped closer, his hand coming up to tilt her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Look at me." She lifted her eyes. Declan felt the air leave his lungs. Her eyes were green. Not just green, they were the color of a forest after a storm, deep and desperate and terrified. And as he stared into them, his own eyes shifted. The human charcoal gray bled away, replaced by a glowing, molten gold. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice rough with a need he didn't understand. "How are you here?" Alara opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. I was just... Achoo." The sound was tiny. A small, congested sneeze. Declan froze. His head whipped toward the supply closet. The predator in him took over. The protective instinct that had just flared for this woman suddenly spiked into aggression. There was someone else in the room. A threat. "Who is there?" he snarled, stepping away from Alara and stalking toward the closet. "No!" Alara screamed, forgetting her rank, forgetting her fear. She lunged for his arm. "Please, please, don't." Declan ignored her. He reached the door and ripped it open with a force that nearly tore it off its hinges. He was expecting an assassin. He was expecting a corporate spy. He was prepared to tear a throat out. Instead, he found a pair of mismatched eyes blinking up at him from a pile of towels. One blue, one gold. The boy couldn't have been more than 5. He was hugging a battered rabbit, his messy dark hair sticking up in every direction. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just looked up at the 6'4" billionaire alpha with a solemn, unnerving curiosity. The silence in the room was deafening. The thunder outside was a distant memory. Declan felt his entire world axis shift. He looked from the boy to the woman, and back to the boy. The resemblance was there, the nose, the chin. But the scent, under the sickness, the boy smelled like her. Alara had collapsed against the conference table, sobbing silently, waiting for the execution. The little boy rubbed his nose, sniffled, and pointed a small finger at Declan. "Are you the monster?" Leo asked, his voice raspy from sleep. "From Mommy's stories?" Declan Sterling, the man who made mayors tremble and alphas submit, felt his knees hit the floor. He lowered himself slowly, until he was eye level with the child in the closet. The gold faded from his eyes, leaving them human, vulnerable, and unmistakably stunned. He reached out a hand, hesitating inches from the boy's face, as if afraid the child might break. "No," Declan whispered, the words scraping out of his throat. He looked up at Alara, promising violence to anyone who had ever made her afraid, before looking back at the boy. "No, little one," he said softly. "I'm the one who kills the monsters." The ride to the penthouse was a blur of rain-streaked neon and terrifying silence. Alara sat in the back of the sleek, armored Maybach, clutching Leo to her chest as if he were a life raft in a hurricane. She expected the car to turn toward the police station, or worse, toward the outskirts of the city, where problems were made to disappear. But Declan Sterling didn't speak. He drove with one hand on the wheel, his knuckles white, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror. not checking for traffic, checking on them. When the car finally slid into the private underground garage of the Sterling Towers residential wing, Alara's breath hitched. This wasn't a police station. This was the Spire, the highest point in the city, the stronghold of the Onyx Pack. Out, Declan said. It wasn't a request, but the growl in his voice had lost its edge. It sounded less like a command and more like a necessity. He ushered them into a private elevator that moved so smoothly Alara couldn't even feel the ascent. When the doors opened, she didn't step into a hallway. She stepped into a world she had only ever seen on the glossy covers of magazines she cleaned out of trash bins. The penthouse was a cavern of glass, dark wood, and masculinity. It smelled of cedar, old paper, and that underlying current of power that seemed to radiate from Declan's skin. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a city that looked beautiful from up here, instead of gritty and cruel. Leo, who had been silent with awe, wiggled out of Alara's arms. His mismatched eyes went wide as his feet sank into the plush Persian rug. To a boy who had learned to walk on cold concrete and peeling linoleum, this floor must have felt like a cloud. Stay close, Leo, Alara whispered, reaching for him. Let him explore, Declan said. He was standing by the wet bar, pouring amber liquid into a crystal glass. He downed it in one swallow, then turned to face her. We need to talk about your employment. Alara's stomach dropped. Here it comes. The severance. The threat. I didn't steal anything, she blurted out, her voice trembling. Just the sandwich. I can pay for it. I can work extra shifts. You're fired, Declan cut in. His tone was flat, final. The air left Alara's lungs. Please, she begged, the desperation clawing at her throat. Please, Mr. Sterling. I have rent. I have nowhere else to go. You can't just… I said you're fired, Declan repeated, crossing the room until he towered over her. You are fired from the cleaning staff. You are fired from scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans at 2 a.m. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black key card. He held it out to her. And you are hired, he continued, his voice dropping to a low rumble. As my executive private assistant, live-in. Your salary is tripled. Benefits start immediately. Alara stared at the key card. She stared at him. Her brain couldn't process the whiplash. What? I don't have a degree. I don't know how to run a calendar. I don't need you to run a calendar, Declan said, his eyes burning into hers. I need you here. I need you safe. He turned away before she could see the raw possessiveness in his expression, barking an order into his phone for food. 20 minutes later, the Cinderella moment hit her with the force of a physical blow. Declan had ordered soup rich, creamy tomato bisque and grilled cheese sandwiches made with artisan sourdough. Simple food, but to Alara, it looked like a feast fit for gods. She sat at the massive kitchen island, watching Leo. Her son was sitting on a bar stool that cost more than her entire life's earnings, devouring the sandwich with a ferocity that broke her heart. He had sauce on his chin, crumbs on his shirt, and for the first time in months, his shoulders weren't hunched in fear. Alara took a spoonful of soup. The warmth spread through her chest, chasing away the bone-deep chill of the basement apartment. It tasted like butter and thyme. It tasted like salvation. But as the warmth settled, the old fear crept back in. Nothing in her life had ever been free. Every kindness came with a hook. Every offer of safety came with a lock on the door. She set her spoon down, her appetite suddenly vanishing. Declan was leaning against the counter opposite her, watching. He hadn't eaten. He had just watched them, his intense gaze tracking every bite Leo took, every breath Alara drew. What do you want? Alara asked quietly. Declan tilted his head. I want you to finish your soup. No. Alara stood up, her hands gripping the edge of the marble counter until her knuckles turned white. I mean, what do you want? Men like you don't save women like me. Not for free. You bring me here. You dress it up as a job. You feed my son. What is the transaction? What do I owe you? The silence that followed was heavy. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. Declan moved. He didn't stalk. He flowed. He came around the island, closing the distance between them until she was trapped between the marble and the wall of his chest. Alara flinched, bracing herself, but he didn't grab her. He reached out, his hand large and warm and terrifyingly gentle, and brushed his thumb against her jaw. He tipped her chin up, forcing her to look at him. His eyes weren't angry. They were haunted. "You think this is a transaction?" Declan murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "You think I'm buying you? Everyone buys something," she whispered. "I don't want your payment, Alara," he said, his thumb tracing the line of her bottom lip. "I have all the money in the world. I have power. I have territory." He leaned in closer, inhaling the scent of vanilla and jasmine that clung to her skin, the scent that had woken his soul from the dead. "I want your safety," he vowed. "My wolf. He has been asleep for 10 years. But tonight he is pacing inside my chest, and he will not settle. He will not rest. Until he knows you ate. Until he knows you are warm." "That is not a transaction, Alara. That is an instinct." He stepped back, breaking the spell, leaving Alara breathless and confused, her skin tingling where he had touched her. "Finish your soup," he said, his voice returning to that cool, detached command. "There are fresh clothes in the guest room. Sleep. We will talk in the morning." The morning sun hit the penthouse differently than it hit the streets below. Down there, the light was gray and filtered through smog. Up here, it was blindingly clear. Alara woke up in a bed that felt like a cloud. For a moment, she panicked, forgetting where she was. Then, she smelled bacon. She found them in the living room. Declan Sterling, the alpha of the Onyx pack, was sitting on his Italian leather sofa reading a tablet. And Leo was sitting on the floor at his feet, dismantling something shiny. Alara froze in the doorway. Leo was holding Declan's watch, a Patek Philippe worth $50,000. He was turning the bezel, listening to the clicks, treating a masterpiece of Swiss engineering like a fidget spinner. "Leo!" Alara gasped, rushing forward. "Put that down!" "Oh my God. I'm so sorry." Declan didn't even look up from his tablet. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. "Leave him. He likes the mechanics. He has good hands." "It's a fortune," Alara stressed, reaching for the boy. "It's a watch," Declan corrected. "It can be replaced." Leo looked up at his mother, grinning. "It ticks like a heart, Mommy." He went to rub his eye, a habit he had when he was excited. He jammed his small fist into his eye socket, rubbing vigorously. "Leo, careful," Alara warned, but it was too late. The cheap, colored contact lens she forced him to wear every day, the brown one that masked his left eye, popped out. It fell onto the dark Persian rug and vanished. Alara's heart stopped. Leo blinked. He looked up at Declan. The morning light flooded the room, illuminating the boy's face. His right eye was a soft, human blue, but his left eye was pure, molten gold, a wolf's eye, the mark of an apex predator. The silence in the room shattered. Declan slowly lowered his tablet. His gaze locked onto the boy's face. He saw the gold. He saw the vertical slit of the pupil contracting in the light. He stood up. The movement was slow, fluid, and utterly terrifying. "Alara," Declan said. His voice was no longer the gentle rumble from the kitchen. It was cold. It was the voice of the alpha. "Why does your son have the eyes of a wolf?" Alara grabbed Leo, pulling him behind her legs, backing away until she hit the wall. "Please. He's just a child. He doesn't know. He hasn't shifted yet. He is a pup." Declan stepped closer. "A hidden pup, living in my territory, unregistered." He stopped 3 feet from her. "Who is the father?" "It doesn't matter," Alara cried, shielding Leo's face. "It matters," Declan roared, the sound echoing off the glass walls. "Look at his eyes, Alara. That is not a beta's blood. That is not a common wolf. That is alpha blood. Who did you run from?" Alara was shaking. She couldn't breathe. The secret she had carried for 6 years, the secret that had kept them starving but safe, was out. "Thorn," she whispered. Declan went still, stone still. "Repeat that." "Marcus Thorn," she sobbed. "The Blood River Alpha, The temperature in the room plummeted. Marcus Thorne, Declan's rival, a man known for his corruption, his cruelty, and his obsession with genetic purity. Thorne has no son, Declan said, his voice dangerously low. He didn't want a son, Alara said, the words spilling out like blood from a wound. He wanted an heir, a perfect heir. When I got pregnant, I was just an omega, a nothing. He told me the baby would be weak, he said. She choked on a sob, clutching Leo's shoulders. He said a mongrel wasn't worth the air it breathed. He tried to force me to get rid of it. He sent a doctor to my room. That night, I climbed out the window. I ran. I've been running ever since. Alara looked up, tears streaming down her face, expecting to see disgust in Declan's eyes, expecting him to agree with Thorne. Instead, she saw a violence so profound it terrified her. Declan was looking at the glass of whiskey he had left on the side table. He wasn't touching it, but the sheer force of his aura, the kinetic energy of his rage, was vibrating through the room. Crack, the crystal glass shattered. It didn't fall. It exploded outward, shards of glass raining onto the floor. Leo whimpered. Declan closed his eyes. He took a deep, shuddering breath, reining in the monster that wanted to burn the city down. When he opened his eyes again, the gold was swirling, bright and furious. He didn't look at Alara with pity. He looked at her with a terrifying resolve. He tried to kill him, Declan said, his voice devoid of any human inflection. His own blood. He walked over to the window, looking out at the city skyline, toward the east, toward the territory controlled by the Blood River Pack. You don't have to run anymore, Alara, he said quietly. He'll find us, she whispered. He always finds us. Declan placed his hand against the glass, his reflection superimposed over the storm clouds gathering outside. Let him find us, Declan vowed. Marcus Thorne is a dead man walking. He just doesn't know it yet. Time is a strange thing when you've spent your entire life waiting for the other shoe to drop. You learn to live in the breath before the scream. You learn to sleep with your shoes on. But up here, 70 stories above the concrete, time didn't tick. It floated. It had been 2 weeks. 2 weeks of waking up in sheets that felt like spun silk. 2 weeks of Leo eating until his belly was full, his cheeks losing that hollow, gray cast of malnutrition. 2 weeks of waiting for Declan Sterling to demand his payment. But the demand never came. Instead, the routine set in. A strange, domestic rhythm that terrified Alara more than the violence ever had. Violence she understood. Violence was predictable. But kindness? Kindness from a predator? That was a map she didn't know how to read. It was late afternoon on a Saturday. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with the threat of another storm, but the air on the private rooftop garden was still. Alara stood by the glass doors, a mug of tea warming her hands, watching them. They were near the edge of the roof garden, where the Japanese maples turned the concrete into a forest. Declan was kneeling on the grass. He had traded his 3-piece suit for dark joggers and a fitted black t-shirt that clung to the muscles of his back. And facing him, sitting cross-legged with his eyes scrunched shut, was Leo. For the last few days, Leo had been struggling. The headaches had started sharp, blinding spikes of pain. He was crying at the sound of the dishwasher, flinching when the elevator chimed. Alara had thought he was sick. Declan knew better. His senses are coming online, he had said, calm as a surgeon. The city is too loud for a pup who doesn't know how to filter. Listen to me, Leo. Declan's voice drifted across the garden. It wasn't the voice he used in the boardroom. It was low, resonant, a rumble that seemed to travel through the earth rather than the air. Don't fight the noise. You can't fight the city. It hurts, Leo whimpered, his hands pressed over his ears. It's buzzing. Like bees. Alara's instinct was to run to him, to scoop him up and hide him in a quiet closet. Her foot moved forward, but she stopped herself. She watched as Declan reached out. He didn't pull Leo's hands away. Instead, he placed his large palms over Leo's small ones, covering them completely. I know, Declan said softly. It's too much. The cars, the electricity, the heartbeats. It's a flood. Make it stop, Leo cried. I can't make it stop, Declan said. But I can teach you how to build a dam. Alara watched, mesmerized, as Declan shifted his position, grounding himself. Close your eyes, Leo. Visualize a dial, like on a radio. Right now, you're at volume 10. You're hearing the traffic on Fifth Avenue. You're hearing the AC unit, 3 floors down. Leo nodded, a tear slipping out from under his squeezed-shut eyelids. Find my voice, Declan commanded gently. Push everything else behind a wall. Focus only on my voice. It is the anchor. Do you hear it? Good. Now, turn the dial down. Just 1 notch. Focus on my heartbeat. Can you hear it? Silence stretched over the rooftop. Alara held her breath. It's slow, Leo whispered. That's right, Declan murmured. Boom, boom, boom. Match your breathing to it. Let the rest of the world fade into white noise. It's not gone, Leo. It's just background. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Leo's shoulders dropped. The tension that had been coiling his small body tight for days began to unravel. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of rain and earth and alpha. Declan didn't move. He stayed there, a massive, unmovable statue of patience, holding the space for a boy who wasn't his, teaching him how to survive the burden of his own biology. Alara felt something crack inside her chest, a fracture in the wall she had built around her heart. She had spent 6 years trying to be everything for Leo. Mother, father, protector, provider. She had carried him through snowstorms and slept in alleyways. She would die for him, but standing there, watching Declan guide her son through the sensory minefield of his heritage, she realized the one thing she couldn't be. She couldn't be an alpha. She couldn't teach Leo what he was. She had been so afraid of the monster in the high tower. She had bought into the media stories, the ruthless corporate raider, the cold-blooded killer. But the man on the grass wasn't a monster. He was a father. As if sensing her gaze, Declan looked up. Across the 20 feet of manicured garden, his eyes locked onto hers. The gold in his irises was dim, warm, like embers in a dying fire. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just looked at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. It was a look of recognition. I have him, the look said. I have us. And then, the sky broke. It didn't start with a drizzle. It started with a deluge. The clouds ripped open, and cold, heavy rain hammered down instantly, soaking the world in seconds. Run! Declan laughed, actually laughed, a deep, booming sound that Alara had never heard before. He scooped Leo up in one arm like a football and sprinted toward the glass doors. Alara fumbled with the handle, sliding it open just as they crashed into the living room, bringing the smell of ozone and wet earth with them. Declan set Leo down. Go dry off, pup. Towel warmer is on. That was awesome, Leo shrieked, wet hair plastered to his forehead, before sprinting down the hall toward his bathroom, leaving wet footprints on the hardwood. Sudden silence fell over the living room. Alara stood by the door, drenched. She had only stepped out for a second to grab a forgotten cushion, but the rain had soaked her thin blouse, plastering it to her skin. Her hair was dripping down her neck. She was shivering, adrenaline and cold mixing in her blood. Declan stood 3 feet away. He was worse off. The gray t-shirt was translucent now, clinging to every ridge of muscle on his chest and abdomen. Water dripped from his dark hair, running down the sharp line of his jaw, tracking over the cords of his neck. The air in the room suddenly felt very thin. He looked at her, really looked at her. His gaze dropped to the pulse fluttering wildly in her throat, then lower, tracing the curve of her waist, before snapping back to her eyes. The gold in his eyes flared, brighter this time. Hungry. You're shivering, he said. His voice was rough, lower than it had been with Leo. It's cold, Alara breathed. Is it? He took a step, then another. Alara backed up, instinct taking over, until her shoulder blades hit the cool plaster of the wall. She should have been terrified. A 6'4" alpha had her cornered, but she wasn't scared. She was burning. Declan placed one hand on the wall beside her head, leaning in. He didn't touch her. He crowded her space, surrounding her with his heat, his scent wet cedar and raw power overwhelming her senses. He was close enough that she could count the droplets of water caught in his eyelashes, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his skin. "Alara," he whispered. It sounded like a prayer, or a warning. She looked up at him, her lips parting. Every cell in her body, every dormant wolf instinct she had suppressed for years, was screaming at her. "Submit. Safe. Mate. Mine." "Declan," she breathed. He leaned down. His face was inches from hers. His eyes dropped to her mouth. She could feel his breath on her lips, hot and fast. The tension was a pulled rubber band, agonizing and perfect. She wanted him to bridge the gap. She wanted him to take what the universe said was his. She tilted her head back, an unspoken invitation. Declan's hand on the wall clenched into a fist. The drywall groaned under the pressure. His nose brushed against her jawline, inhaling deeply, shuddering as her scent filled his lungs. He wanted to devour her. He wanted to claim her right here, against the wall, to mark her so thoroughly that even the memory of Marcus Thorne would be burned away. But then he froze. He pulled back an inch, just an inch. His eyes searched hers, frantic and tortured. He saw the desire, yes, but underneath the desire, buried deep in the green of her eyes, he saw the shadow, the flinch, the muscle memory of a woman who had learned that touch meant pain. He couldn't do it. Not like this. Not when she was cornered. Not when the adrenaline of the storm was mimicking the adrenaline of fear. "I can't," Declan rasped, the words sounding like they physically hurt him. He pushed himself off the wall, putting a foot of distance between them. His chest was heaving. "Declan?" Alara asked, her voice small, confused. "What?" "I am not him," Declan said fiercely, turning his back to her because looking at her while she looked like that wet and willing was breaking his resolve. "I am not the man who takes what he wants just because he can." He ran a hand through his wet hair, gripping the back of his neck. "When I kiss you, Alara, and I will kiss you, it won't be because you're cornered. It won't be because you're grateful for the food or the safety. And it won't be because my wolf is demanding it." He turned back to face her. The gold in his eyes was still there, but it was steady now, controlled. "It will be because you trust me enough to step toward me." He held her gaze for one long, heart-stopping second. "Go change," he said hoarsely, "before you catch a cold." And then he walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway, leaving Alara alone in the darkening room. Alara slid down the wall until she hit the floor. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around herself to stop the trembling. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Run," a small, scared voice in the back of her head whispered. "Run while the door is unlocked. Run before the debt comes due. Alphas are dangerous. Alphas consume. He will swallow you whole." That was the survival instinct, the one that had kept her alive for 6 years. It told her that men like Declan Sterling were traps wrapped in silk. But then, a newer, deeper voice answered. He stopped. He had her against the wall. He had the biological imperative, the power, the opportunity. And he stopped. He starved his own nature to feed her agency. Alara touched her lips, which were still tingling from the ghost of his breath. She looked down the hall where Leo was singing to himself in the bathroom, safe and happy. She looked at the spot where Declan had stood, a man who burned for her but refused to burn her. For the first time in her life, the instinct to run was silent. In its place, a new, terrifying thought took root. "I don't want to leave." And that was far more dangerous than running. Because if she stayed, if she let herself fall for the Alpha King, she wouldn't just be risking her life. She would be risking the one thing she had never let Marcus Thorne touch. Her heart. The obsidian hall was not designed for parties. It was designed for intimidation. Tonight, it was draped in white silk and filled with the city's elite senators, billionaires, and the hidden kings of the supernatural underworld. It was the annual Peace Summit, a night where the Pax pretended to be civilized, sipping champagne while planning turf wars behind smiling teeth. Declan Sterling walked in like he owned the air in the room. But tonight, no one was looking at the Alpha King. They were looking at her. Alara. She wasn't wearing the gray uniform of a cleaner. She wasn't wearing the oversized hoodies that hid her shape. Tonight, she was a weapon. The dress Declan had chosen was crimson, a deep, violent red that looked like blood spilled on snow. It clung to her curves like a second skin, open at the back, daring the world to look. She gripped Declan's arm, her knuckles white. "They're staring," she whispered, her voice tight. "Let them stare," Declan murmured, leaning down so his lips brushed her ear. His hand was a heavy, possessive weight on the small of her back. "Let them see exactly what belongs to me." They moved through the crowd, a shark cutting through a school of fish. Declan was radiating a warning so potent that people actually stepped back as they passed. "Mine," his aura screamed. "Touch and die." But peace is fragile when ghosts walk through the door. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The chatter died down, rippling into silence from the entrance. Marcus Thorne had arrived. The alpha of the Blood River pack looked like a politician on a campaign trail, blonde, handsome, and rotting from the inside out. He was smiling, shaking hands, playing the part of the benevolent leader. Alara froze. Her breath hitched, trapped in her lungs. 6 years. She had spent 2,190 days hiding from this man, and then he stopped. Thorne's head snapped toward them. His nostrils flared. He didn't smell the expensive perfume or the canapes. He smelled her. And underneath the vanilla and jasmine, he smelled something else. He smelled the faint, lingering scent of a pup on her skin. His bloodline. His eyes narrowed, turning into slits of ice-blue malice. He excused himself from a senator and began to cut a path toward them. "Declan," Alara breathed, her hand tightening on his tuxedo jacket. "I see him," Declan said. His voice was calm, but his body was a loaded gun. "Go to the balcony. Stay in the light. I will intercept him." Declan. Alara obeyed, slipping through the crowd toward the French doors. But she didn't make it to the balcony. As she passed the corridor leading to the restrooms, a hand shot out from the shadows. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a vice. Thorne yanked her into the alcove, pinning her against the velvet-covered wall before she could scream. Well, Thorne sneered, his face inches from hers. He smelled of mint and decay. "The little runaway bitch cleans up nice." Alara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't tremble. That was the surprise. She waited for the old fear to paralyze her, for the mouse to cower before the cat. But the fear didn't come. Instead, she felt heat. She felt the phantom weight of Declan's hand on her back. She remembered the training on the roof. "You are not prey." "Get off me, Marcus," she said. Her voice was steady, cold. Thorne laughed, a cruel, wet sound. "Or what? You think because you're warming Sterling's bed, you're safe? You think a pretty dress changes what you are?" He leaned in, sniffing her neck. "You're trash, Alara. An omega nothing. And I smell him on you. The bastard. You kept it." "His name is Leo," she hissed. "His name is Mistake," Thorne corrected, his grip on her arm tightening to a bruise. "And he is my property. Genetic runoff. I should have cut him out of you myself. But don't worry, I'll correct that error soon enough." Something in Alara snapped. The dam broke. The years of hiding, of starving, of looking over her shoulder, it all coalesced into a singular point of white-hot rage. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She moved. Crack. The sound of the slap echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Alara's hand stung, but she didn't care. She had struck an alpha. She had struck the monster of her nightmares. Thorne's head whipped to the side, a bright red handprint blooming on his perfect cheek. He looked back at her, stunned into silence. "He is not yours," Alara snarled, stepping into his space, her green eyes blazing. "He is not property, and he is not a mistake. He is mine." Thorne's shock vanished, replaced by pure, humiliated fury. His eyes flashed red. "You stupid whore." He raised his hand, claws extending, aiming for her throat. He never made contact. A shadow fell over them. A darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow the light in the corridor. Thorne froze. He looked up. Declan Sterling was standing there. He wasn't wearing his human mask anymore. His tuxedo jacket was straining at the seams. His eyes were fully shifted pools of molten, glowing gold. And his teeth were bared in a snarl that promised extinction. There was no witty banter, no step away from her. There was no negotiation. Declan moved faster than human eyesight could track. He slammed into Thorn with the force of a freight train. They crashed through the hallway, smashing into a decorative pillar, sending plaster and dust raining down. The music in the ballroom cut out. Screams erupted. Declan didn't care. He had Thorn pinned to the ground. He wasn't fighting like a man. He was fighting like a beast. He rained blows down on Thorn's face, brutal, sickening thuds of bone on bone. Thorn tried to shift, tried to fight back, clawing at Declan's chest, shredding the expensive shirt. But Declan was the Alpha King for a reason. He was stronger. He was faster. And he was fueled by a rage that had been building since the moment he saw Leo sleeping in a closet. "You touched her!" Declan roared, the sound half human, half wolf. He grabbed Thorn by the throat and lifted him off the ground, slamming him back down. Thorn gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. "You hunted her." Slam. "You threatened my son." Slam. Thorn was limp now, barely conscious, a broken mess on the marble floor. The crowd had gathered in a terrified circle, watching the massacre. Declan stood over him, chest heaving, Thorn's blood dripping from his knuckles. His hands were trembling, his claws fully extended. He looked at the man who had tormented his mate. He reached down, gripping Thorn's neck. He was going to rip his throat out. Right here, in front of the Senate, in front of the cameras. He didn't care about the politics. He didn't care about the prison sentence. He tightened his grip. Thorn's eyes bulged. "Declan!" "No." The voice cut through the red haze. Small hands grabbed his arm. Not pulling, she wasn't strong enough to pull him off, but holding. Grounding. Declan froze. He looked down. Alara was there. Her red dress was ruined, stained with dust. But she didn't look at Thorn. She was looking at him. She was looking directly into his golden, monstrous eyes. "Declan, stop," she begged, her voice cracking. "He threatened you," Declan growled, his grip not loosening. "He deserves to die." "Yes," Alara said. She didn't lie. She didn't plead for Thorn's life. "He deserves it. He deserves worse." She reached up, placing her palm against Declan's blood-splattered cheek. "But not like this," she whispered. "Look at me, Declan. Look at me." He blinked, the gold flickering. "You are not him," she said fiercely. "You are not a butcher. You are the man who held a little boy's hands to help him hear the world. You are the man who gave me a home." Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through the makeup. "If you kill him like this, you lose that. You lose yourself. And I need you. Leo needs you." She pressed her forehead against his arm, sobbing. "He isn't worth your soul, Declan. Please, don't let him take that from you, too." The silence in the hall was absolute. 500 people held their breath. Declan stared at her. He felt the frantic beat of her heart against his arm. He smelled the salt of her tears mixing with the metallic tang of blood. Slowly, agonizingly, the red haze receded. Declan loosened his grip. Thorn slumped to the floor, gasping for air, coughing up blood, broken and humiliated but alive. Declan didn't look at him. He turned to Alara. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her neck, breathing her in, shaking with the aftershocks of violence. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair, shielding her from the crowd, shielding her from the world. "I've got you." The silence in the penthouse wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy, warm, and filled with the scent of rubbing alcohol and rain. Declan sat on the edge of the master bed, his tuxedo shirt discarded on the floor, his chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. The violence of the obsidian hall felt a lifetime away, but the evidence was still painted on his skin. Alara stood between his knees, her hands steady as she dabbed antiseptic onto a long, thin scratch across his ribs, the only mark Thorn had managed to land before Declan dismantled him. "It's already healing," Alara whispered, watching the skin knit together under her touch. "You didn't have to let me do this. I wanted your hands on me," Declan murmured. He wasn't looking at the wound. He was looking at her. He reached out, his large hand encompassing hers, stopping her movements. He pulled her closer until she was standing flush against him, her red dress a stark contrast to the white sheets. "You stopped me," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Tonight, you stopped me from killing him. He wasn't worth it." She repeated the words she'd said in the hall. "No," Declan shook his head. "You saved me, Alara. You looked into the eyes of a monster, and you called him back to the surface. No one has ever done that. Not in 10 years. He took the cloth from her hand and set it aside. His grip on her waist tightened, pulling her down until she was sitting on his lap, her face level with his. The gold in his eyes was soft now, like candlelight. "I have billions in the bank, Alara," he said, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "I have an army at my command. I have buildings with my name on the skyline. But until tonight, when I stood between you and him, I realized I had nothing." He leaned his forehead against hers. "Be mine," he breathed. "Not just my assistant, not just under my protection. Be my mate, my equal. Help me rule this city." Alara looked at him, really looked at him. The fear that had defined her life for 6 years was gone, burned away by his ferocity and his tenderness. "I'm messy, Declan," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I come with baggage and trauma and a son who isn't yours." "He is mine," Declan corrected fiercely. "And you are the only peace I have ever known." Alara smiled, and it was the first time it reached her eyes completely. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm yours." 1 year later, sunlight didn't just hit the penthouse. It flooded it. The glass walls were thrown open to the summer breeze, carrying the sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "Higher, push me higher." Leo was laughing, a bright, bell-like sound that echoed off the skyscrapers. He was 6 years old today. He was sitting on a swing set that had been installed on the terrace, his legs kicking at the sky. Alara stood by the patio doors, leaning against the frame, watching them. Marcus Thorne was gone, serving 3 consecutive life sentences in the supernatural maximum security prison deep in the Rockies. His pack had dissolved, absorbed into the Onyx territories. The threat was a ghost story, nothing more. "All right, hold on tight, pup," Declan laughed. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, looking younger, lighter. He pulled the swing back and let go. Leo soared up, shrieking with delight. As the swing came back down, Leo jumped off, landing in a tumble on the grass. He scrambled up, running toward Declan with a grin that showed off a missing front tooth. "Did you see, Dad?" Leo shouted, grabbing Declan's leg. "Did you see how high I went?" Alara's breath hitched. It was the first time. "Dad." Declan froze for a split second. He looked down at the boy clinging to his leg, the boy with one blue eye and one gold eye, the boy who wasn't his blood but was entirely his heart. Declan scooped him up, swinging him around until Leo was dizzy with giggles. "I saw," Declan said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were flying, kid." Declan looked over Leo's shoulder and caught Alara's gaze. He smiled a true, unguarded smile that lit up the entire terrace. Alara looked out past them, toward the city skyline. It was the same city that had once been a prison of cold concrete and hunger. But now, it shimmered. She wasn't the invisible maid scrubbing floors in the dark anymore. She wasn't the runaway looking for scraps. She was Alara Sterling. And she was home. They say fairy tales are for children. They say the darkness always wins. But sometimes, monsters learn to love, and the laundry maid becomes the queen. Thank you for listening to the Alpha's Stolen Heir. If this story made your heart race, please let me know in the comments below. I love reading your theories and thoughts. What do you think happens when Leo gets his first wolf shift? Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the romance. And please subscribe to Lunar Wolf Tales and ring the bell so you never miss a new episode. We have plenty more alphas waiting to meet you. Until next time, stay wild. But now, a scent hit him like a physical blow. It wasn't the chemical sting of industrial cleaner. It was vanilla. Warm, sweet vanilla, and the heady, nocturnal bloom of jasmine. It was the scent of home, the scent of fate. A low, vibrating growl started deep in his chest, a sound so primal it seemed to vibrate the glass walls. His wolf, silent for a decade, roared to life, clawing at the back of his mind, screaming a single word: mine.